The laboratory was cold, its walls shining with silver panels and blue lights that hummed softly like a distant storm. Rows of glass containers filled with glowing liquids lined the shelves, each one bubbling faintly as if whispering secrets no one wanted to hear. This was not a place of comfort or warmth. It was a place where life was measured, tested, and often broken. To the galaxy, it was just another research center. To the humans dragged inside, it was a prison with no windows. Ethan sat on the steel table in the center of the room. His wrists were free, but the guards outside the door meant freedom was an illusion. His dark hair was messy, his face pale from weeks under artificial light, but his eyes were steady. Unlike other captives who begged, cried, or screamed, Ethan sat quietly watching, waiting. It was not the silence of fear. It was something else, something the aliens did not understand. The door slid open with a hiss. Lyra entered, her white coat flowing around her slender frame. She was young for her kind, barely 30 cycles, with sharp violet eyes and skin faintly shimmering in the sterile lights. In her hands she carried a tablet glowing with data. To her, Ethan was not a man. He was Subject 17, the latest in a long list of creatures meant to reveal secrets of strength, endurance, and the strange resilience humans were whispered to possess. She did not greet him. She did not ask his name. Instead, she tapped her tablet and spoke in a flat voice. "We will begin physical resistance testing today. You will follow instructions." Ethan tilted his head slightly. His lips curved into something almost like a smile. "Do you have a name, or should I call you scientist?" Lyra froze for half a second. It was such a simple question, yet none of her subjects had ever asked it before. Most avoided her eyes. Most only whimpered or obeyed. But Ethan looked directly at her as if daring her to answer. She blinked, then frowned. "Names are irrelevant. Begin exercise 1. He stood slowly, stretching his stiff limbs. "Names are never irrelevant," he said softly. "They're the first gift someone ever gives you." Something twisted in Lyra's chest. She ignored it and gestured toward the machine on the far wall. Ethan stepped forward without complaint, placing his hands against the sensors as instructed. The machine hummed, scanning his muscle strength, his heartbeat, his oxygen levels. Numbers flowed across Lyra's screen, all normal, all expected. Yet her eyes kept drifting from the data to his calm face. Why was he not afraid? Why was he speaking as if they were equals? Hours passed in tests, reaction drills, pain endurance, balance trials. Ethan followed every command, never once shouting or cursing. When Lyra recorded notes, he sometimes spoke, asking quiet questions. "Do you enjoy this work? Do you believe in it? Do you ever wonder what happens to the ones who don't survive?" She tried to block his voice out. She told herself it was meaningless noise, but the questions lingered even after she dismissed them. That night, as she reviewed her reports, she found herself writing the words, "Subject unusually calm, unusually aware." Then she deleted them, rewriting with the cold tone required. "Subject displays typical human resilience," yet her fingers trembled. The next day, she returned with another set of experiments. Ethan was already awake, sitting cross-legged on the table as though he had been waiting for her. When she entered, he lifted his eyes and said, "Good morning." The words hit her like a stone dropped in still water. No one had ever greeted her. She felt the faintest heat rise beneath her skin. She straightened her posture. "Prepare for testing. You still haven't told me your name," Ethan replied. Her lips parted, then pressed shut again. She wanted to snap at him to remind him that he was just a subject, but instead she found herself whispering, "Lyra." Ethan's smile widened slightly. "Lyra," he repeated as if tasting the sound. "That's a beautiful name." Her pulse quickened. She forced her eyes back to the tablet. This was wrong. This was dangerous. She had seen other scientists warned, even punished, for showing emotion toward test subjects. Attachments were forbidden. Attachments made one weak. But when she looked up again, Ethan was watching her, Not with anger, not with fear, but with something else entirely. Something that unsettled her more than defiance ever could. By the third session, whispers began to ripple through the lab. Other researchers noticed Lyra's hesitation, the way she lingered too long, the way her voice softened when she addressed him. One of her colleagues, a stern older alien named Veyron, pulled her aside. "You're spending too much time with Subject 17, he warned, his tone sharp. "Do not forget what happened to Alan. Compassion leads to ruin." Lyra forced herself to nod, but the words did little to cool the strange warmth growing in her chest. When she returned to the chamber, Ethan was there, waiting as always. His eyes found hers the moment she entered. And for reasons she could not explain, her steps grew lighter, her heart faster. That night, when she closed her eyes, she expected to dream of numbers, data charts, clinical reports. Instead, she dreamed of his voice repeating her name. Lyra. She woke with her pulse racing, her breath quick. She pressed her hands against her chest as if to steady her heart. This was not supposed to happen. He was just a human, just a subject, just another piece of data. But every time she looked into his eyes, she felt the cracks forming in the glass walls she had built around her heart. And she feared, deep inside, that one day those walls would shatter completely. The laboratory lights glowed pale blue, as if the entire room had been dipped in cold water. Machines hummed their endless rhythms, and footsteps echoed faintly across the steel floors. Lyra entered quietly, her tablet tucked under her arm, her posture sharper than usual. She had promised herself she would be different today, colder, distant, professional. She could not allow her emotions to distract her. Yet the moment her eyes found Ethan sitting calmly on the table, her resolve began to crack. He looked tired, shadows under his eyes, his hair messier than the day before. But still he sat upright, his expression steady. When she approached, he offered a small nod. "Morning, Lyra." Her chest tightened. She hated that the sound of her name on his lips affected her more than any chart or scan ever could. She forced her voice into the same flat tone she had practiced. "We will continue physical stress testing. Prepare yourself." Ethan tilted his head slightly. "Do you ever get tired of this?" She frowned. "Of what?" "Of treating people like machines," he replied softly. "Of pretending none of us matter." The words slid under her armor like a blade. She did not answer, only gestured for him to stand. But his question echoed in her mind as she attached sensors to his chest and wrists, watching numbers rise on her tablet. She told herself the numbers mattered more than his words. And yet when he flinched at the cold touch of the metal pads, she whispered without thinking, "I'll try to be gentle." Ethan's eyes met hers, steady and warm. "You already are." Her breath caught. She pulled back quickly, focusing on the screen, pretending not to hear. The hours passed in silence, broken only by the hum of machines and the sound of Ethan's steady breathing as he endured each test. When one trial pushed his heartbeat dangerously high, Lyra ended it sooner than scheduled. She told herself it was for accuracy, but deep down she knew it was for him. Veyron would have scolded her. The other scientists would have called it weakness. She did not care. Later, when she entered her notes, she hesitated again. Subject displays unusual resilience, recommends further endurance tests. She stopped. Her fingers hovered over the screen before she typed instead. Subject maintains calm under stress, displays strong mental discipline. It was the closest she dared to come to honesty. That night, she reviewed surveillance clips. Ethan sat alone in his chamber after she left, humming softly to himself. No words, just a tune. It was simple, almost childlike, yet it filled the empty room in a way no data ever had. She found herself leaning closer to the screen, her hand rising unconsciously to her chest. She shut the feed quickly, ashamed of her curiosity. The next morning, Ethan looked weaker. His shoulders slumped and his skin carried a faint pallor. Lyra's chest tightened at the sight. She told herself not to speak, but the words slipped out anyway. "Are you in pain?" Ethan gave her a faint smile. Nothing new? Don't worry about me. I have to, she replied, before she could stop herself. His smile widened, soft and tired. Then maybe you're not like the others. She froze, her throat tight. He could not say things like that. He could not make her doubt everything she had built her life around. But when she looked at him, she realized he already had. That evening, while entering data, Varen appeared beside her desk. His cold eyes scanned her notes. Your reports are softer than expected. His voice was edged with suspicion. Be careful, Lyra. Subject 17 is only human. If you let him get inside your thoughts, you'll regret it. Lyra forced herself to nod, but unease gnawed at her. She knew what happened to scientists who became too close to their subjects. Alan, years ago, had been reassigned and never seen again. The reminder chilled her. When she returned to Ethan's chamber, she found him sitting quietly, watching the ceiling. His voice was calm when he spoke. You look troubled. She sighed, sinking into the chair near the wall. You notice too much. Maybe that's why they study us, Ethan said with a faint smile, because we notice the things they try to ignore. Lyra should have silenced him. She should have told him to stop talking. But instead she asked, What do you notice about me? Ethan leaned his head to the side, his gaze soft but piercing. That you're not here because you want to break me. You're here because you want to understand me. And maybe because you don't like being alone. Her heart skipped a beat. She rose quickly, turning her back, gripping her tablet so tightly her knuckles turned pale. Enough, she whispered. But her voice lacked strength. That night, Lyra dreamed again. Not of charts or reports, not of data or orders. She dreamed of Ethan's voice humming that tune, of his eyes meeting hers with warmth instead of fear. She woke with her pulse racing, her breath uneven. She pressed her hand against her chest, whispering to herself that it was nothing, only weakness, only distraction. But she knew, deep inside, that the cracks in her walls were widening. The next day, during a long endurance test, Ethan collapsed. Alarms blared, monitors screamed, and Lyra rushed to his side. She knelt, pressing her hand against his chest, whispering his name without thinking. His eyes opened faintly, finding hers even in his weakness. You care, he whispered. Her throat tightened, her hands trembling. For the first time, she did not deny it. The chamber lights flickered faintly as Ethan lay on the cold steel table, his chest rising and falling in uneven rhythm. The test had been too much. Lyra had ended it, but not quickly enough. His body had reached its limit. She sat beside him, her fingers shaking as she adjusted the monitoring device. Numbers glowed across the screen, warning signs flashing red. To the other scientists, he was only Subject 17. To her, in that moment, he was something else. Fragile, human, alive. She pressed a cloth against his forehead, cooling his skin. Stay with me, she whispered, forgetting that the chamber microphones might record her words. Don't give up. His eyes opened slowly, heavy with exhaustion. For a moment, they wandered, unfocused. Then they found her. Still here? He murmured, his voice weak but steady. Lyra exhaled a breath she didn't know she was holding. Relief washed over her like a tide. She should have called for Varen, should have filed a report, should have followed the rules. But instead she stayed beside him, her hand lingering near his. The lab cameras saw everything, yet in that moment she no longer cared. Later that night she entered her private quarters and reviewed the day's footage. She deleted the audio files, her hands trembling as she bypassed the system. It was dangerous, but necessary. If Varen heard her whispering to Ethan, if he saw the way she leaned close, questions would follow. And questions in this place were knives. The next morning, Ethan looked better. Still pale, still weak, but alive. When Lyra entered, his lips curled into a faint smile. Good morning, Lyra. She should have ignored him. She should have remained distant. But instead she found herself answering softly. Good morning, Ethan. He blinked. It was the first time she had spoken his name. As the day went on, the walls she had built around herself continued to thin. When she brought him food, she added an extra slice of fruit, small but meaningful. When he shivered under the cold, lab air, she left a warmer blanket on his bed. These gestures were quiet rebellions, secrets hidden in plain sight, and though she never admitted it, she waited each day for the moment his eyes would meet hers, for the way his voice softened when he spoke her name. One evening, after the tests were done, she lingered in the chamber longer than usual. Ethan sat on the table, legs dangling, his gaze distant. "Do you ever wonder," he said softly, "what it feels like to live free?" Lyra frowned. "Free?" "Yes," he replied. "To walk outside without permission, to feel rain on your skin, to choose who you want to be with, not who someone else orders." Her chest tightened. She had never thought of it that way. Her life had always been duty, order, expectation. She was born to follow, to study, to prove herself. She had never been asked what she wanted. And now, hearing him speak of freedom, something inside her ached. She sat across from him, lowering her voice. "Tell me about your world," she said. He smiled faintly. "Earth? It's not perfect. But we had music, real music, not just sterile sound waves. Families would gather at tables, share food, laugh even when times were hard. And the sky, it wasn't always clear, but sometimes, on the best nights, the stars looked close enough to touch." Lyra listened, her throat dry. No data file had ever described life the way he did. No report had ever made her chest feel heavy with longing. For the first time, she realized she was not only studying him, she was learning from him. That night, she dreamed again. But this time it was not only his voice or his eyes. She dreamed of herself standing beneath Earth's stars, her hand entwined with his. She woke with her cheeks warm, her heart racing. She pressed her palms against her face, whispering, "This cannot happen." But the truth was already inside her. What began as curiosity had grown into something deeper. The bond between them was forbidden, yet it grew stronger with each passing day. One afternoon, during a genetic endurance test, Ethan collapsed again. Lyra rushed forward, ignoring the shocked look of another assistant in the room. She knelt beside him, holding his hand tightly. "Stay with me," she pleaded. His eyelids fluttered, his lips barely moved, but he whispered her name. In that moment, Lyra knew she could no longer pretend. She could no longer write reports as if he were only data. He was not a test. He was not just human. He was Ethan, and her heart, traitor as it was, had chosen him. But the walls around them were closing in. Farron had already noticed her hesitation. Other scientists watched her too closely. She saw suspicion in their eyes, heard whispers when she passed, and she knew what would happen if they discovered the truth. Attachments were weakness. Attachments were betrayal. Attachments were punished. Still, when she left that night, she glanced back at him through the glass. His hand lifted slightly, a small gesture of farewell. And her chest filled with warmth so fierce it scared her. For the first time in her life, Lyra was afraid, not of failure, not of punishment, but of losing him. The alarms rang through the laboratory like iron bells, harsh and unrelenting. Capir. Lights pulsed across the silver walls, flashing warnings of a transfer order. Lyra's chest tightened as she read the message on her tablet. Subject 17 scheduled for relocation to Facility 9. She knew what that meant. No human sent there ever survived. The facility was infamous for pushing experiments to extremes until the subjects were broken, body and mind. Ethan would not last long in such a place. She walked quickly down the corridor, her steps echoing louder than her heartbeat. Guards passed with stern faces, their weapons slung across their shoulders, their eyes indifferent. To them, Ethan was just cargo. To her, he was something she could no longer deny. She reached the chamber and saw him sitting on the steel table, his wrists bound for transport. He looked calm, almost too calm, as though he had already accepted his fate. "You're being moved," Lyra said, her voice trembling. Ethan nodded faintly. "I guessed. The way the guards looked at me this morning. Cold. Final." He lifted his eyes to hers. "This is the end, isn't it?" "No," she whispered, though the word caught in her throat. She stepped closer, lowering her voice so the cameras would not catch. "I won't let them take you." He blinked, surprise flickering across his tired face. "Lyra, you can't—" "I will," she interrupted, her tone sharper than she meant. "I have access codes. I can open the gates. I can—" She stopped, forcing her breath steady. "If I stay silent, you'll die. If I act, maybe we both die. But I'd rather risk death than watch you disappear into their machines." Ethan's lips curved into the faintest smile. "You'd risk everything. For me?" Her throat tightened. She wanted to deny it, to hide behind duty, but the truth refused to stay caged. "Because you are not an experiment to me. You never were. You made me see what life should be. You made me feel." For a moment, silence stretched between them, heavy with everything unsaid. Then Ethan leaned forward, his bound hands trembling. "Then let's take the risk together." Before she could respond, the door hissed open. Veyron stepped inside, his violet eyes sharp as knives. "Step away from the subject, Lyra." Her heart leapt into her throat. She turned slowly, hiding, her panic behind a mask of calm. "I was just preparing him for transfer." "Don't lie to me," Veyron snapped. His gaze darted to the monitors, then back to her. "You've grown soft, I warned you. Attachments are poison." Lyra's hands tightened around her tablet. She forced her voice steady. "And what if attachments are the only thing that make us more than machines?" Veyron's face darkened. "Enough." He gestured to the guards outside. "Take her away, for questioning. I will handle Subject 17 myself." As the guards moved forward, Lyra's instincts flared. She shoved the tablet against the wall, shattering it. Sparks flew. The room's lights flickered, and the cameras blinked out. In the brief chaos, she rushed to Ethan, entering the override code into the wrist locks. The cuffs clicked open. "Run," she hissed. Ethan's eyes widened, but he grabbed her hand without hesitation. They sprinted past the stunned guards, the sound of boots pounding close behind. The alarms grew louder, echoing through every corridor. Red lights flashed like angry eyes. They turned corner after corner, hearts racing, breath sharp. Lyra's access card opened door after door, but the system grew suspicious, locking down faster than she could override. At last, they reached the outer gate, a tall steel barrier glowing, with blue shields. Beyond it, the sky stretched wide, filled with stars and freedom. But the shield remained firm. Lyra's trembling fingers entered the final code. "Come on," she whispered. "Please work." Behind them, guards shouted, weapons charging with a deadly hum. Ethan stepped in front of her, ready to shield her with his body. "Hurry, Lyra!" The screen flickered, denied once, then twice. On the third attempt, the barrier groaned, its light fading. The gate slid open just enough for them to slip through. "Go!" Lyra pulled Ethan forward. They ran into the night air, the first breath of freedom burning their lungs. But the danger was far from over. Searchlights burst to life above them, sweeping across the compound. Sirens blared, echoing into the distance. They stumbled toward the shadow of a transport dock, hearts hammering. Ethan grabbed her hand tightly, his grip steady despite his weakness. "We're not safe yet." Lyra met his gaze, her chest heaving. "I don't care. I'll never let them take you again." And in that moment she knew there was no turning back. She had betrayed her own people. She had chosen a human over her own kind. She had chosen love over duty. The galaxy would not forgive her. The system would hunt them, but as long as Ethan's hand held hers, she would face it all. The night air was sharp and cold, filled with the distant hum of sirens and the whir of search drones slicing through the sky. Ethan and Lyra crouched behind the shadow of a cargo hauler, their breaths visible in the pale glow of the moon above. The open world stretched before them for the first time. No silver walls, no locked doors, no humming machines. Yet freedom felt fragile, hanging by a thread that could snap at any second. Lyra's hands trembled as she worked on the access panel of the hauler. Sparks jumped from the wires, the screen flickering red before turning green. She exhaled with relief. "The ship can fly," she whispered, glancing at Ethan. "But once we lift off, they'll hunt us across the stars." Ethan's lips curled into a faint smile, even though exhaustion weighed heavy on his body. "Then let them hunt. Better to run together than to rot apart." Her chest tightened at his words. She reached out, brushing her fingers gently against his cheek. "You shouldn't be here at all. You should have been home, you should have been free." His hand rose, covering hers. His warmth was weak but steady. "And you should have stayed safe. But here we are, choosing each other anyway." Before she could answer, a beam of light swept across the dock, followed by the metallic stomp of armored boots. Voices barked orders, sharp and cruel. The soldiers had found them. Lyra pulled Ethan toward the ship's hatch, slamming the door, shut behind them as red bolts of plasma struck the metal hull. The ship rattled as if caught in a storm. "Strap in," she shouted, rushing to the pilot's seat. The engines roared to life, shaking the ground beneath them. Ethan staggered to a chair, strapping himself in with trembling hands. The ship lifted, fire spilling from its thrusters, and rose into the black sky. Blinding spotlights followed, and warning sirens screamed. Gunships darted from the compound, their weapons glowing as they gave chase. Bolts of plasma streaked past the cockpit, lighting the dark sky with flashes of red. Lyra's hands flew across the controls, her face set in fierce determination. "They'll shoot us down," Ethan said, his voice steady despite the chaos. "Not if I can outfly them," she replied. Her jaw tightened. "Hold on." She pulled the ship into a sharp climb, the engines howling as the stars spun wildly around them. The gunships fired again, but their blasts struck only empty air where Lyra had been seconds before. She darted, between the beams of light, weaving through the night like a dancer in the dark. Ethan gripped the seat, his heart pounding, but his eyes never left her. For a moment it felt as if time slowed. The alarms faded, the gunships shrank behind them, and only the vast canvas of stars filled the cockpit window. The galaxy stretched, wide and endless, untouched and full of promise. They had made it through the first storm. But Lyra knew the chase would not end. Varen and the others would never forgive her betrayal. They would brand her a traitor. They would call Ethan nothing, more than stolen property. Yet when she looked at him, bruised and weary but alive, she felt no regret. Ethan leaned toward her, his voice soft but steady. "Back in the lab, they told me I was just a subject, just a test. But you made me more. You gave me a reason to fight." Lyra's throat tightened. She wanted to say so much. That he had given her life. That he had shown her what it meant to feel beyond duty, beyond orders. Instead, her voice broke into a whisper. "You are not an experiment, Ethan. You are my choice. You are my heart." He smiled faintly, his eyes glistening. "Then let's live, Lyra. Not as scientist and subject. Not as captor and prisoner. Let's live as us." Tears pricked her eyes, but she blinked them away, her grip firm on the controls. "Then we will." The stars opened before them, infinite and untamed. Behind them, the lab was only dust and shadows. Ahead lay uncertainty, dangers, hunters, and an entire galaxy that might never accept them. But for the first time, Lyra felt alive. For the first time, Ethan felt free. The ship broke through the last layer of clouds, the vast emptiness of space swallowing them whole. The engines hummed with steady power as they vanished into the dark horizon. In the silence of the cockpit, Ethan reached across the console, his fingers finding hers, their hands clasped tightly, as if anchoring them both against the weight of the galaxy. "They thought I was just a lab test," he whispered. "But you proved I was more, and I'll never stop loving you for it." Lyra squeezed his hand. Her, voice steady and fierce. Then let the galaxy hear it, because from now on we live not as subjects but as hearts that chose each other. The ship streaked into the stars, two souls bound together, defying every rule written against them. And in that endless expanse the experiment ended. But their story had only just begun.